The start of the regular season is just 2 days away, so we offer our predictions on the regular season from the likely to the impossible on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. The best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and join more than 14,000 Locked On Heat lifers by subscribing on YouTube. A reminder, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Got a fun show for you today. We're doing our increasingly bold Miami Heat predictions for the 2024-25 season. We each came up with 3 predictions. One that's a sure thing, one that's going to be a reach, and one extremely bold prediction. Let's start with our sure thing. David, jump right in with yours.
It's a lot tougher than you might think, given the fact that Miami scoring over the last few seasons has been pretty evened out between the big three of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero. But even though I think Jimmy Butler is going to be much more engaged and better than he was last year, and although I think Bam's scoring averages are going to go up with the added three-point shot, my prediction is that Tyler Hero will lead the team in scoring. He was tied for the lead last year with Jimmy Butler, both of them averaging 20.8 points per game. I think Tyler's averages are going to go higher. We've liked what we've seen from him in the offseason. In the preseason. He's playing much more off ball. He's much more comfortable in his role. He looks like he's physically stronger and able to absorb more contact as he drives to the rim. I think we're going to see more free throws from him, which has always been a point of contention for me. And we always know that he can shoot and he can find ways to score. But now when you incorporate these other aspects that make scoring much more easy for him, I think he's going to continue to up his scoring averages and he'll wind up leading the team.
I think this is a really good prediction. Not because of everything you just said, but also because, he basically led the team in scoring last year. It would not be strange for Tyler Hero to lead this team in scoring for 2 years in a row. I know he was tied with Jimmy Butler, but basically was the leader there. He averaged the most field goal attempts per game in the preseason. And I do think that while the preseason isn't everything, I think this preseason was quite instructive for the Heat in terms of what this new offense is going to be, their style of play. I think it's funny, like reflecting back on Media Day, Eric Spoelstra talking about, look, we're not going to scrap the offense altogether. We're going to make small tweaks here and there to try to be more efficient. And he straight up lied. Like, that is a completely different offense than what it was last season. There were no small tweaks. That was wholesale changes. And it will get, and because of that, I'll get to my prediction later on here. But with Tyler, he averaged the most field goal attempts per game in the preseason with almost 12 for every 20 minutes that he played. So assuming that that's going to go higher when he's playing 30, 34 minutes per game, 85% of his threes in the preseason were assisted. That's a great rate for Tyler Hero. Now 60% of his twos were unassisted. You would look at that and be like, that's like more of him dribbling into those long mid-range jumpers and stuff like that. But we didn't see a ton of those. A lot of those unassisted 2-pointers were him putting his shoulders into a defender and getting to the basket. A lot of steal and scores. And I think Tyler Hero is going to be really engaged. He might steal like 2 to 4 points per game just with transition play, right? Nice. And so you're adding that to his point total. I think this is when we have this as your sure thing, I think it's a pretty good bet that Tyler Hero will be Now, the only reason I would say it's probably not going to be is because Jimmy Butler can roll out of bed and score 20 points on backdoor cuts and 8 free throw attempts per game, right? It's just like his floor is so much higher than Tyler Hero's. But I don't know that we get a 40-point game from Jimmy Butler this season, like this regular season. We don't really see that version of Jimmy Butler in the regular season. And if the offense is designed to be a little bit more egalitarian and not run through Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo as much in terms of like low post scoring and being that first instigator, then I could see a world where Tyler Hero is just sort of the beneficiary of this egalitarian offense and getting a lot of shots up.
All right.
Oh, no. So, I think that's a good prediction. That gets me to my sure thing prediction, and that's Bam Adebayo will attempt more than 300 three-point attempts this season. And he's going to make 35% of them. That sounds like an extreme number. And when I first jotted this down, David, I was like, Bam's going to take 150 threes. I'm like, you know what? Kind of doing the math. That's not enough. Bam's going to take 200 threes. I'm doing the math. If that guy plays 70 games, probably not enough. 250? But you know what? The guy averaged 3.3 3-point attempts in 20 minutes per game in the preseason. Now when he's playing 34 minutes per game, 36 minutes per game, I think he's going to hover around 4 3-point attempts per game. And if you look 4 to 5, and if you look at the list of centers last year who averaged about that many 3-point attempts per game, Naz Reid, 400 3-point attempts last year. Brooke Lopez, 404 last year. Victor Wembanyama, 394. Jaren Jackson Jr., 366. Chet Holmgren, 349. Karl Anthony Towns, 327. Miles Turner, 324. Nikola Vucevic, 313. Santi Aldama, 304. Kristaps Porzingis, in 57 games, attempted 293 3-point attempts per game. That 300-point attempt, Mark, is not that high of a benchmark. And it seems to not only not be that high, but even the standard for floor spacing bigs. And I do think that Bam is going to be that. I was a little skeptical over the summer. I'm like, hey, guys, calm down. It was only 1.5 3-point attempts per game over the last 20 games of last season. As much fun as it was in the Olympics, it wasn't like a high-volume 3-point shooting thing for Bam. It was only kind of here and there. But he came out in the scrimmage and took like 11 3-pointers in 15 minutes in the scrimmage. And then in the preseason has been, like I said, 3.3 3-point attempts every 20 minutes. So you just extrapolate that for a full game, and I think 4 to 5 is very much in his wheelhouse. I think he's going to do it. I don't think it's just a function of the preseason, because you're also looking at this more perimeter-oriented offense, which is what I was hinting at earlier, and Bam's going to be out there, left open. And as we have seen, if he's left open, he's going to shoot it. He is confident with that shot. He believes he's a good 3-point shooter. So not only do I have him attempting more than 300, I have him making 35% of those. He shot 38.5% in the preseason. I think that comes down a little bit. I think almost, well, I have one more little tiny prediction branched off of this, but what do you think about that? 300 3-pointers.
You just mentioned it. My concern is that it was a function of the preseason, and we've seen this in the past, that teams incorporate different lineups as they're working through rotations and they're trying new things and they're just kind of establishing a wider base that they might explore at some point during the regular season, but they're still going to go to what they're much more comfortable with and explore their bread and butter. And that's going to be what we see on a night-to-night basis. But I do also tend to think that this is here to stay for Bam Adebayo in terms of him shooting a lot of threes. I just hear that number and it sounds like such a drastic number considering where he was last year. But I mean, it makes sense mathematically. And I know you've always said it's not your strong suit. When you look at the number of games Bam's played in the past, the amount of minutes he's playing, if he just takes those couple of shots here and there over the course of a game where he's left open, and that's going to be frequent, that could average 3-4 attempts per game. That almost, again, is 200 right there. If he's 300, though, that just seems like a
300.
lot.
3 to 4 a game. That's 300 threes.
If he plays 70 games, no, it's still only 280. It's or 280 or less. At the most, it'd be 280. So it's just, again, it's a lot.
4 to 5.
But I do think it's going to be a function of the offense. I think it's going to be a part of his repertoire, certainly. And I do tend to think that he's going to be shooting a lot of threes. It just, the 300 number seems a little daunting. I would have saved this one maybe for a little bit more of a bold prediction. Yeah, a little bit of a reach. But I do like the fact that he's taking more threes, and that is going to be part of it. So I just, when you look at the offense, I think he's still going to have moments where he doubts whether or not he lets it fly, or where he's trying to look for a better shot, because I just
especially if he goes through a little bit of a
him.
slump, right? Like he was shooting 38% in the preseason. He was letting it fly. If there's like a week where he's like 2 of 14 from 3-point range, he might slow down a little bit.
We've seen this from shooters, like people whose strength of their game is shooters, Duncan Robinson, Steph Curry, etc. Guys that, will hesitate if their shot isn't falling, etc. Maybe not so much, but we've seen that certainly from Duncan. The point being that if he misses the first 2 in a game, like even early on, he might be a little hesitant to let it fly, and then it's going to be much harder for him to reach that 4 to 5 average that you kind of need in order to reach the 300 mark. I think it's going to be something he's going to get over. I think he's going to be able to still be comfortable, a little hesitant to put up as many shots, even if those shots are wide open for him. So that's what makes this one a little bit more difficult to think that it's going to be 300. But certain 200 would have been a sure thing for me. 300
I'm not
feels
in
a little
here
bit
for
of a reach.
easy. I could have said 100. It would have been a sure thing. trying to keep it interesting here, but
even 200 though, that's averaging over two per game. That's like
I
a
think
pretty
that's what
substantial
I'm
leap for
saying.
him.
We've cleared that bar, and what's crazy is he's attempted 104 3-point attempts for his career. And I'm talking about tripling that in a season. And I
Yeah.
think I'm looking at it. And maybe I'm drinking too much of the Kool-Aid right now, but man, like I think we're here. The other part of this too is because of the offense. I actually think he's going to take fewer shot attempts overall this year.
Hmm.
I think he's going to be more of a playmaking hub. I don't think he's going to be asked to be taking those free throw line jumpers all the time and basically be Miami's entire offense the way that he was for long stretches last season. I think I think Bam's role is going to look a lot more similar to what it did in like 2020, where he was running those dribble handoffs out there and all that stuff. I think we're going to get to a point where, because maybe his shot volume comes down, the playmaking responsibility goes up from the perimeter. I think it's not going to be 50%, but close to half of his total attempts might be from 3-point range. His shot chart, I think, is going to look completely different this year. He's still going to get into those free throw line jumpers here and there. He's always going to do that. I think I'm interested to see what Spoelstra's rotations are going to be when Bam is on the court and Jimmy's off, and what those lineups look like and what Bam's responsibilities are in those lineups. But I don't know. I think we're in for like a transformative season for Bam. He might not even average as many points as he did last year. Maybe he does, but it's on little smaller volume. I don't know, but I think overall his game is going to change a lot. More predictions next, including what the Heat should be aiming for on the offensive end this season. The numbers show that the best case scenario could be very good. We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Halloween is around now, and obviously everybody's getting ready, and it kind of lets us have fun with things that scare us, right? You see monsters, you explore your fears, you see a scary movie. But what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing those fears and for finding ways to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. So if you're thinking of starting therapy and conquering some of those fears, well, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be really convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just basically fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched. It doesn't take more than a few minutes, and you get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for no additional cost. Let's say there's a change to your schedule. Maybe you can't meet with them anymore. Who knows? Whatever your reasons might be, you can make that change, and there won't be any fees to you. So overcome your fears with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. Go visit that today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. We want to invite you to the exclusive Locked On Heat Insider community. If you want to join, there's a link in the show notes on YouTube and in the podcast description. And now is the perfect time with the start of the regular season this week. If you join, you're going to get a bunch of cool stuff, exclusive content, insider info from me and David's reporting on the ground, game notes and stats while we cover these games live, first dibs at mailbag questions. Best of all, the chance to talk with us one-on-one through the subtext messaging platform. This is the best way to be a Locked On Heat lifer. If you want to join, you could sign up with the link in the show notes. It's free for 14 days. It goes to $4.99 a month after that, but you can cancel at any time. No sweat. But we're really excited with the chance to connect with all of you as this season gets started. Also, some more Heat news before we get to our reach predictions. The Heat waived Isaiah Stevens, Warren Washington, and Zion Pullen from their Exhibit 10 contracts over the weekend. They also released Nasir Little from his non-guaranteed contract, setting the roster for the regular season. The roster has 14 standard contracts, 3 guys on 2 ways. So now we know what the roster is. No real surprises there. David, let's get to your reach prediction.
It's something that I've talked about before, and given what we've seen from this team and the way they've generated offense and their defense, it's always been linked symbiotically. We've seen their defense much more plodding. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think we're going to see a team that's active defensively and engage in much more fast break opportunities. But overall, when you look at their defensive approach over the preseason, and that I feel much more comfortable, despite how difficult it could be. That's just who this team's been. They roll out of bed, as you say, and play defense at a top 10 level. I think they're going to lead the league in steals as a team. And I think Jimmy Butler is going to lead the NBA individually in steals per game.
So Jimmy Butler has led the league in steals once before.
Sure.
His second year in Miami, he averaged 2.1 steals per game. He's had 2 other years of averaging 1.8 in a Heat uniform. His best year ever, he averaged 2.4 steals per game. Or I shouldn't say that. That's not his best year. No, that was just a stint during Minnesota. No, his best year was the 2.1 in that second season in Miami. This is very much in his wheelhouse. And I do think that one of the indicators last year about Jimmy, and people said, how can you say that he wasn't still at all-star level? What are you even talking about? He averaged 21 points per game, all these things. I'm like, he averaged 1.3 steals per game. For him, that was a career low, basically after he became a core rotation piece, even in his Chicago days. That's the kind of stuff when we talk about engagement, his steal rate, his block rate, all that little extra stuff that he does that quite frankly makes him special, because as a scorer in the regular season, he's not special, right? He's a 21 point per game scorer. It's not that special. That's the stuff that makes him special. That's the impact two-way stuff. And so if what you're saying bears out to be true, that is a huge thing for the Miami Heat, because not only are you getting the steals and everything that leads to, but you're getting an engaged Jimmy Butler, right? That's what that means. That's what that suggests, is that, oh, Jimmy's here. He's ready for his next contract, and he's putting together an all-star type of season. So I don't know about the Jimmy Butler number. He is also 35 years old. Guys at 35 years old don't tend to lead the league in steals. If he does, I know he wants to play as many games as possible. Again, he's 35 years old. If he plays 60, 65 games, that's might be the most realistic outcome for him, despite everything that he's talking about. So he might have like the most per game, but maybe not the most total. And I'm not really sure how that thing is kind of awarded at the end of the year. Is it total steals, or is it the per game steals? If you hit a certain, whatever.
The variations between like the top and like, I mean, he was 15th last year in steals per game. That's not bad considering, again, his age, the number of games he played, the level of engagement, or whatever distractions were off the court might have been impacting him. That's pretty impressive, all things considered. I just look at this team and their overall approach, and as much as we had concerns about Tyler and Terry as a starting backcourt, I think they're making up for their lack of size, perhaps, with just overall athleticism and constant tenacity and forcing turnovers, and that kind of feeds into a team-wide mentality, because an opponent will start to rattle a little bit when they're getting every to get past them a little bit in the low post, or maybe you'll be able to get past them because of their lack of athleticism or whatever size deficiency they might have. But overall, you're still going to feel the pressure of that defensive tenacity, and that's going to create a cascade that's going to lead to more opportunities for a guy like Jimmy, who, despite his age, his timing is still excellent. He's still really, really good at anticipating when these things are going to take place, and he still knows exactly how to break up these passes. And he reads passes and plays breaking down so well, like a LeBron James, like a Draymond Green, etc. So I still think there's that opportunity for him to lead the league in steals. And again, I think with everybody doing it, you're going to have a team-wide contribution.
That's the one that I agree more with, is even if I have my doubts about Jimmy doing it, based on what we saw in the preseason, I think the Heat have a really strong chance to lead the league in steals. And I would bet, if you talk to them, that's a goal of theirs. I would bet that that's the benchmark. We know that Eric Spoelstra publicly says, oh, we don't care about the numbers, whatever, we don't have it. They definitely do. I just want people to know they 100% have very specific benchmark goals that they want to reach numerically. 43 point attempts per game. That was the goal last year. They almost reached it. Didn't quite get there. That's the goal again this year, I think, is to way surpass that and maybe even push that up. I would bet that their goal is to lead the league in steals. I would bet that that's true. My reach goal is that the Heat will be a top 12 team in offensive rating this year. My reach prediction, I mean. Top 12 team in offensive rating. So with the starters on the court in the preseason, they had an offensive rating of 117.4 in their first 4 preseason games. I'm not including the last one in Memphis because the starters didn't play. That would have ranked 7th in the league last year. So even calling them top 12, like I was like, I don't know, are they going to be top 10 now? Of course, the starters don't play the entire game. I think the bench could struggle at times, especially if they're waffling between, okay, like who we really run. As much as they did figure out, I think, in the preseason in terms of what the starting 5 is going to be, what the main guys off the bench are going to be, I don't think they ever settled on what those next units look like, the second unit, that third shift, and then as you kind of get back into your starting lineup. I think there's still going to be a little bit of experimenting there, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I do think that no matter what, as long as I don't know. Does if as long as Eric Spoelstra keeps two of the core four on the court at all times, Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, he's probably going to separate Jimmy and Bam, separate Terry and Tyler, I would imagine, to a certain degree. And as long as like two of those guys are on the court at all times, there's enough there to generate good offense, especially when you're going up against other backups too. So, and you still have Duncan Robinson coming off the bench. You still have Jaime Jaquez Jr. coming off the bench. Like this team has so many options. I do think they're going to be top 12 in offensive rating, and you combine that with the steals and the easy points in transition that quietly also brought down the Heat's offensive rating last year. Like this team did not score points on the fast break last year at all. They did not get the steals that they wanted. They did not get the turnovers. They weren't forcing the stuff that they wanted to force. If they get back to doing that and they do lead the league in steals again, it's going to be almost hard not to be in the top half of the league in offensive rating, right? Like that.
I want to believe, Wes. I just don't know. I mean, I look at this team and it's just, I mean, you're right. We're talking about this team and we've seen so many encouraging signs over the course of the preseason, but you also have to look at how they are going to be able to play through this for 82 entire games. And at top 12, that seems like such a huge leap from where they were last year. And I know that there's going to be opportunities there, and we've seen the style change and everything else. But I don't know how realistic that could be. But that's
so
why
your buddy Matt Moore on Locked On NBA says that, and he makes this good point. He's talked about this with us. He's tweeted about it, how offensive rating, defensive rating isn't as sticky as people think it is. Like teams will just move up and down that board year to year.
Sure.
And I do think that the Heat have a chance to do that. Top 10 is a little bit too much of a reach. That's why I think top half of the league is probably more of a realistic thing. But the whole idea here is that we're going to do a reach prediction, and this is my reach prediction. I think it's realistic at the same time. You know, I'm not just making a prediction for the sake of making a prediction here.
Are you concerned about the team's 3-point shooting? Because that, you know, obviously they were in the preseason, they struggled. Okay.
They were they shot 33% as a team, I believe, in the preseason, or 30% as a team, but the starters shot 33%, or maybe those might be backwards. But either way, a low percentage in the preseason. They shot 37% last year from 3-point range. If you take that 37% from last year, which I think is much more indicative of a team with Tyler Hero, Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, and by the way, those three guys all had slumps in the preseason from 3-point range. Those guys are not bad 3-point shooters. Those guys are good to elite 3-point shooters. That's going to bounce back, and I think in a big way. And so once you combine that and the fact that their volume has gone up, you take like 37% last year with the new volume of around 40, 42 3-point attempts per game. This is a team that should be top 5 in 3-pointers made per possession this season. I think that's it sounds crazy, but we're only like a couple years removed from the Heat leading the league in 3-point shooting percentage. It's not,
I know.
Like I said, the stuff varies every year. It's crazy.
But the composition of that team was a little different, and you've got Nikola Jovic, and he's struggling this preseason. So I just there are questions that make this a little bit more dubious and difficult to imagine. But everything is aligned so that the prediction will come true. It just actually has to manifest in a way that I don't know is very likely. But hey, that's what predictions are all about.
Our bold predictions are next. I'll tell you what the Heat ceiling could be if everything works out. We'll do that here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with big returns over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I know it's a tough weekend for a lot of Dolphins fans, but that's okay. You can always bounce back. Hey, guess what? Tua's back, so it's going to be all right. I was talking to a few fans watching the Dolphins game yesterday. They don't expect much, even with Tua's return. They still think there's going to be a middling team, but I think they'll go 8-3. Oh, yeah, 8-3 over the rest of the season. Yeah, I think they'll finish 10-7. I think
getting to 500 would have been so clutch against the Colts this week, and it was right there for us. We could have been 500. You get Tua back, and that's exactly where you want to be. But to your point, the AFC East kind of stinks this year. There's still some room to maybe climb up. When Tua comes back, I think it's going to look a lot better. The defense has been better than we expected.
Yeah. Sometimes, you're watching a game and you want to kind of, in the middle of it, you've got a hunch, or maybe you want to check out the latest stats, or even watch live play-by-play. Well, guess what? You can do that and so much more, and it's all on the same page where you place your bets right now, so you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's just $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, but only when you visit FanDuel.com. So go ahead and get started today by visiting FanDuel.com. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We have a very special guest to share some stories about Pat Riley's tenure in Miami ahead of Pat Riley Court being unveiled to start the regular season. You're not going to want to miss this upcoming episode of Locked On Heat. David, your bold prediction for the season is?
We were talking before the episode, and I told you my bold prediction. He's like, that's not even that bold. And it's like,
Right,
you know what?
Give me your bold. I'll tell you how I take it a step further.
Given what we've seen from this team over the last couple seasons, given the projections that every pundit in the country is making about this group, given the strength of the Eastern Conference and the fact that everybody's made these improvements and Miami probably has to just generate more offense internally, their changes are going to come from internal growth, etc. My bold prediction is that this team will avoid the play-in tournament despite all those different factors. I just think they're going to be better than they were last year. I think we're going to see some drop from one of the teams that predicted top 4 teams in the East, whether it's a Milwaukee or a Philadelphia, given their injury concerns. New York might not live up to those overhyped expectations. So many different things. Who knows what happens with Boston if they're just as motivated? I don't know how many times Joe Mazzulla can show the town in order to get them fired up for a second season after they just won a championship. There's so many different things to predict there. One of those teams is going to drop, and that allows Miami to get past that group in the middle there, the Indianas, the Orlandos, the Cleveland. You know, Cleveland's already going to be missing Max Strus, former Heat player Max Strus, for 6 weeks, I think, at the very least. So that already kind of sets them back. Their depth isn't that great. Who knows? That might be the opportunity for Miami to finally be healthy and be able to get past those teams and avoid the play-in. I'm not saying they're going to be a great team, but I think they're going to be just good enough to avoid the 7th and 8th seed.
David, I want you to take a look at the screen here. Here's a definition of bold.
Let's see.
Showing an ability to take risks, confident and courageous. None of that was courageous. None of that was taking a risk. Here's what a bold prediction looks like, David. The Miami Heat are going to be a top 4 seed and have home court advantage in the first round in the Eastern Conference this season. That is a bold prediction. I'm going to tell you why it's going to happen, okay? The Celtics, the Bucks, the Knicks, and the 76ers. You mentioned the teams that all pundits put in a top tier in the Eastern Conference, and I agree, by the way, with this. I have no issue with this whatsoever. Those are your contenders in the Eastern Conference. In that next tier, you have some debate, but most of the time it's the Cavs, the Pacers, the Magic, and some people put the Heat in there, but most people don't really know what to do with the Miami Heat. And I actually think that puts the Heat in a really good position. As we've already covered, this is going to be a different-looking Heat team. Yep. I really, truly believe that. Just the way that they play, the level of engagement. I think the fact that Jimmy Butler is playing for a contract, Bam Adebayo is kind of morphing into the superstar that this team is, like, and I think sort of that unselfish, unheralded star will set the tone more for what this team is. Tyler Hero, putting all this stuff about being an all-star top guard in the league, putting all of that on the side, I think this is going to be a very different kind of team, a full year of Terry Rozier, etc. Nobody knows what to make of the Heat, and I think that gives them a road to surprise some people. I think the Celtics are going to be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference again this year. I just have a hard time not seeing it, barring injury, and that goes with every team. But I think they end up being the number 1 seed. I actually think Milwaukee ends up being the number 2 seed. I know that team seems like a mess, but Giannis is a walking 50-win program. Doc Rivers, for all of his playoff warts, never finishes with fewer than 50 wins in the regular season. Like, that's a regular season wins machine. But the Knicks are already dealing with injuries, right? Yep. Mitchell Robinson is out. Precious Achiuwa is out. You lose one of those wings, which is going to happen once OG Anunoby decides he's going to have to sit 2 weeks because of his elbow again. I think that team is going to lose a lot more. Their over-under is like 53.5 on FanDuel. I think that's crazy. I almost have that a lock as an under. I think their playoff stuff is much better. But in terms of regular season wins, I'm a little dubious about the Knicks. The 76ers are already out here talking about how they're not going to play their guys for a lot of regular season games, and they're going to prioritize rest over winning games. Michael Pino over at The Ringer already predicted them to make the play-in tournament. So they might be the team that falls out. So I have 2 teams in that top tier as locks to finish with basically 50-plus wins and in one of those top 4 seeds, the Celtics and the Bucks. But I think the other top 2, I think 2 of those 4 seeds are wide open. Why not the Miami Heat, right? Like the Magic, I know a lot of teams, a lot of people want to be high on them. As we know in the NBA, development is not linear. I think the Magic were really fun and really surprising last year. There are still major questions about their offense. I don't know that their defense is going to be as dominant this year to counteract their offensive struggles. The Pacers, they're like the opposite of the Magic. They have really major defensive concerns, and I think with another year of tape on them, teams will know how to play them a little bit better, where they seemed to be caught by surprise a little bit last year. I think the Cavaliers can be very good. Who knows? So my prediction is actually Celtics, Bucks, Cavs, Heat as the top 4 seeds in the East next year. That's at least my bold prediction, David. That's a risky prediction, but you take all of that and Miami's net rating with their starters on the court during the preseason, again, just preseason, but was like plus 15 per 100 possessions. Even if that comes down to earth a little bit, that's still one of the better net ratings. You need to be typically plus 4, plus 5 to be one of the top teams in your conference. And I think that's very much a possibility for the Miami Heat. So the numbers bear it out. I think the way that the East is going to play out is not what most people are going to expect. I think a top 4 seed for the East is extremely not realistic, but could be an aim for this team, and that's why it's my bold prediction. Top 4 seed in the East.
All right. I mean, listen, it's certainly a little bit more bold, I guess, than my prediction, but I think either way, it bodes well for this team. I think we're all feeling very optimistic about this group. Maybe not all. I think there are plenty of fans certainly that have their questions and concerns. Those are legitimate based on what we've seen over the last few years. A top 4 seed, certainly possible. Like I think we're both kind of aligned in the same way. Like one of the top 4 teams or 2 of the top 4 teams are probably going to struggle. They're not going to be able to reach whatever outsized expectations have already been set on them. And we know that they're capable of being better. And we've seen that kind of growth this year. I think they're going to be deeper. I think they're going to be better overall. Mm-hmm. I think that's why this team is poised to be certainly finish with a better record.
Just quick speed round bonus predictions. I got a couple of them for you. All right. The Heat will have 2 All-Stars. It'll be Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. I think you're getting a stronger start from Jimmy Butler, and he'll get rewarded with an All-Star appearance. Thomas Bryant or Khalil Ware will end up being Miami's backup center by the time the playoffs begin. I think Miami's closing lineup will be Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Jaime Jaquez Jr., and Bam Adebayo. I think one of the 2-way contracts will get swapped out for Isaiah Stevens at some point. And my final prediction, and this one might be qualified as a bold one, teams will call about Haywood Highsmith at the trade deadline.
Ooh.
And that's my final
prediction. He's a bargain contract.
Oh, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Good versatile defender. He could shore up a lot of weaknesses that you might have. Makes a lot of sense. But the Heat will say no because they're going to be making their all-in push for a deep playoff run of their own.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.